Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Alaska's Political Pipeline. We are going to go through a couple local election results. We did get some new numbers last night. We want to talk about those. We'll do that in a few minutes, but first we want to look at some national politics. Busy couple of days, as they always seem to be lately. And so to help us out, excuse me, I'm bringing in our senior national correspondent, Peter Zampa. Peter, a lot going on. Let's start with Ukraine. Just days after the Biden administration gave approval for Ukraine to use American-made ballistic missiles, they have been fired into Russian territory for the first time. What's the administration saying about this?
Well, yeah, Tracy, the tensions are clearly rising even more in the region, but the U.S. is putting the blame squarely on the Russians and Vladimir Putin for bringing another country's soldiers into the mix. They call that the escalation here. Thousands of North Korean soldiers getting experience on the front lines with all of these Russians. That is the line that was crossed in the eyes of the Biden administration. So they scrambled to figure out how to further protect Ukraine alongside their allies, giving them this permission to use U.S. arms to strike into Russian territory. And of course, an expected response from Russia, they updated their nuclear doctrine, saying that an attack, a conventional attack from a country like Ukraine that is backed by the United States and nuclear power puts a nuclear response on the table. So really bringing things up to a boiling point. The Pentagon maintains this is not the start of World War III, despite all of these new actors in play and really the ratcheting up of tensions.
And so President-elect Donald Trump continues to fill out his cabinet. We've been watching this eagerly here in Alaska. What's the latest on that?
Not so much the controversial bombshells we've seen in recent days and weeks, but a couple of announcements today. Howard Lutnick, his campaign transition co-chair, the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, another billionaire, tapped to join his cabinet as the Secretary of Commerce. Now, Lutnick was floated around as a possibility for Treasury. Either way, it appears, if confirmed by the Senate, he will find his way into this cabinet after all. And also Dr. Mehmet Oz, Tracy. This is a name a lot of people are familiar with. He used to have a talk show, and he also was in the political spotlight a couple of years ago during that failed campaign for U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. A very high-profile race, a controversial race. He lost, but now he's being tapped to lead the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, so he will burst back into the spotlight as well.
And so, speaking of President-elect Trump, he was attending the SpaceX launch for today. What's the significance about that? Made big news.
Well, yeah, Tracy, I mean, I was watching this launch. It's really cool. Millions of Americans were. It's just something that obviously Donald Trump is fascinated by. So there was a personal touch there and also a professional touch. On the personal side, he's gotten very close with Elon Musk, who is obviously the head of SpaceX. He's made it clear how fascinating he found the mechanized arms catching that rocket blaster in recent months, and he wanted to see it in person. Unfortunately, that part didn't actually play out, but still a cool moment for him personally. Professionally, he's going to have control of NASA now. He's going to be in charge of a lot of space policy, and NASA and SpaceX work hand in hand. This private-public partnership is crucial for the future of our space technology, exploration, and just making sure we continue to push the envelopes. That's going to be something that Donald Trump is heavily involved in, and Elon Musk will be as well. So sort of getting some insight into what he's looking forward to over the next 4 years.
And one other question, we also found out that Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg said he opposes the Donald Trump hush money case being dismissed. What does this mean for the case?
Yeah, Tracy, he made it clear that he does not want to see all of the work of these 12 jurors who were here day in, day out for weeks on end, and really of the Justice Department. He doesn't want to see it all just thrown out because Donald Trump is the president-elect. But he did acknowledge in this letter to the judge that this is an unprecedented moment and that he has respect for the office of the presidency. So he's looking for non-dismissal options, basically, which could mean a freezing of the case. Put this on ice throughout Donald Trump's next 4 years, let him serve out his second term, and then bring all of this back up and get to a sentencing at that point. Well, it's not up to him. It's up to the judge in this case, Juan Merchan. We will see what he does as far as a pathway forward.
Thank you, Peter Zampa, our senior national correspondent. We really appreciate your insight and the information because, as I said, it just feels like it's crazy busy these days. We never get a bit of a rest. So thanks for joining us. And so we're going to let Peter go, and I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of our election results for Alaska. We're watching a couple races very closely. Tomorrow night, I believe at 5 o'clock, is when we will be starting the ranked choice voting tabulation. And that is going to decide a couple of these major races. Let's start with the U.S. House. This is one we're watching closely. At this point, 98.8% of the votes are in. There are a possibility of a few more votes coming in today and tomorrow. The last day for absentee ballots to be received from overseas is tomorrow, so there is a chance that there are still some ballots out there set to come back in. Right now we have Republican challenger Nick Begich coming in at 48% of the vote total, and Democratic incumbent Representative Mary Peltola at 46%. Neither one of them at this point has that magical 50% plus one vote, which means it will go to ranked choice voting tabulation, and that will begin, as I said, tomorrow evening, we believe, at about 5 o'clock. Let's look at some of the other state races as well that are of interest. This one, Mike Cronk, was in the House, decided to move to the Senate, to run for the Senate. It looks like he is above that 50% plus one as of this point. There is 95.7% of the vote in there, so there is a chance that a little bit of movement can still occur with that race. But at this point, it does look like Mike Cronk will be a member of the Senate. He has said he will not vote with the bipartisan majority in the Senate. And State Senate District L, this is one we've been watching very closely. Kelly Merrick was challenged in the primary by 3 other Republicans. They saw her as not being conservative enough. 2 of them dropped out after the primary. Jared Gecker was the last person to challenge Kelly Merrick, also a Republican. Right now we're at 46 to 39%. Lee Hammermeister, the lone Democrat in the race, with 13% of the vote. When they move to ranked choice voting tomorrow, it will be those votes for Lee Hammermeister that will determine this election. The question is, who did they rank second, and did they rank someone second? There is always the possibility that someone did not rank a second choice, and so we would just, their vote, obviously they don't go any farther when that's when they do the tabulation if they didn't make a second choice. This one, pretty dramatic win. Charles Kopp is declared the winner by the Associated Press, and really not much change, even with that little bit, about 1.6% that is still out there, 61% to 37. That means that Charles Kopp will be the majority leader in the state house. They will also be forming a bipartisan coalition. He will be the majority leader. Craig Johnson previously was the rules chair in the state house. This one, again, it hasn't been marked as one. It's a little bit close. There's just a few votes still out there, but it does look like Julie Colomb is continuing to hold her seat. She is the Republican incumbent, challenged by Walter Featherly, nonpartisan, for that seat. This is going to be interesting in District 28. You have 3 Republicans vying for the same seat. No incumbent in this race, but 3 Republicans. Obviously, we will be moving to ranked choice voting, and it is going to turn out that the people who voted for write-ins or for Jessica Wright will be the people that determine who, between Alexi Moore and Steve Menard, which one of those gets into the seat. Pretty close race between Moore and Menard, 37% to 35%, and less than 200 votes separate them. So that is also going to be a close and interesting race to watch. That will move to ranked choice tabulation. This one's just on the edge right at this point. Hasn't got enough that we're going to say that there's no ranked choice tabulation. Jubilee Underwood going against David Eastman, who is the Republican incumbent. 95% of the vote is in, so just a little bit is still out there. This one's leaning toward not having to go through ranked choice. Kai Holland, who nonpartisan but was supported by the Democratic Party, he is at 54% as of now, with just 1.2% of the vote still out there. And Lucy Bauer, 45%. Looking at 5,001 votes for her. At this point, it looks like there will not have to be a ranked choice tabulation. It will stay as it is. Ted Eichscheid Also, just a little bit above that 50%, not enough with the little 1% of votes out there, not enough that they are willing to call the race. Stanley Wright, the Republican incumbent, is still there with 47%. We'll have to watch tomorrow and see what those final totals are when they come in, whether that 52% holds and whether or not we have to go to ranked choice tabulation. This is another one very close. It looks like Mia Costello just a little bit above 50%. If that holds, Mia Costello will be returning to the state house. And she, like I said, just a little bit above that 50%. State House District number 1. We are at Jeremy Bynum, Republican, 52%. The other two pretty balanced. That's where those votes were split pretty evenly between Agnes Moran and Grant Echohawk. If that holds, no ranked choice voting tabulation being needed. This is also another very close one. When we're this close, it is really going to depend on those little percentage points of what happens. Right now, Cliff Grow is at 50%, David Nelson at 49%. And look at that, we are really just 25 votes separating the two of them. We have about 1.2% of the votes still out there. So very close race for District 18. Switching to District 31, pretty considered a fairly dominant win. We're going to be looking at Maxine Diebert. She will be returning as the Democratic incumbent, 54% to Bart LeBon, who has 45 at this point. And then this is another situation where we are very close and pretty evenly split out. Rebecca Schwenke has 35%, Brandon Kowalski at 33%, very close, and Pamela Goody also at 25%. So it really is going to come down. Of course, James Field, the Libertarian in this race, 5% of the vote. So depends on who, if anyone, those people who voted for Fields or for Good, who did they rank? If they ranked anyone, who did they rank second? That is going to be what determines the end result of this race. Looking at District 6, this also will move to ranked choice voting at this point with only 2% of the vote out there, 46% to 43% for the top two vote getters, and Republican Dawson Slaughter is at 9%. Those votes will be totaled if somebody made a second choice. Where do those votes go? Do they go to Republican incumbent Sarah Vance or Brent Johnson? And this one already been called by the Associated Press. Justin Ruffridge is going back to Juneau, the Republican incumbent. It was also challenged by another Republican, Ronald Gillum. He's got 40% of the vote at this point. This one very close, 51% still Bill Elam, a Republican challenged by another Republican. We did see this in a number of races where people seem to feel that the Republicans in the House weren't conservative enough, and so they challenged them. And we've got 51% to 47%. It'll just depend on those last few votes. There's still about 4.5% out there that's still to come in. Jesse Bjorkman, a Republican incumbent, being challenged by a Republican and a Democrat. In the end, it'll likely be the votes for Tina Wegner. I apologize. I have a tickle in my throat, who will decide who goes to Juneau in State Senate District D. And looking at District F, again, this one likely to go to ranked choice voting tabulation tomorrow night, 48 to 44% for the top two vote getters, the Democrat Janice Park at 44% and the Republican incumbent James Kaufman. Republican Harold Borbridge will be the people who voted for him will be what decides that election. And looking at District N, likely at this point the Republican Robert Yount will be going. That he beat out another Republican, the incumbent David Wilson and Stephen Wright, but at this point at 52%, so likely that does not go to ranked choice voting tabulation. And this last one, Scott Kowalski, Democrat incumbent, leaning toward the fact that he will go to the state Senate once again, and just a little bit above that 50% mark that is needed. So speaking of ranked choice voting tabulations, these are the current numbers. It is very, very close. The no votes have eased up. Less than 200 votes separate these two positions, and we are at 1.2% of the votes still out there. So this is really up for grabs. such a tight race for whether we continue with ranked choice voting in our next election cycle. So all of this means tomorrow evening we are going to get that final ranked choice voting tabulation. Now before then, as I said, we do have a good chance we'll see some new numbers either tonight or tomorrow before the tabulation begins, and we are going to do our best to bring that to you live so we can watch along. If you saw it the last time, it is a fascinating process, and it moves along quite quickly. So there isn't a lot of calculation. The calculations are done quickly by the computer. So you get to see them happen very fast. We appreciate you stepping in and checking in with us. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Alaska's Political Pipeline.